video, we are going to be learning about how to create UI integration cards. We are going to be using UI integration cards to massively improve the look and feel and the overall user experience of our business site. Now, integration cards are just another way of exposing application content to your end user, just like any other Fiori application or a Freestyle UI5 application. But it's going to be much simpler than that. Now, as developers, we are always interested in seeing what is going on behind the scenes. And for sure, you want to know what an integration card actually looks like architecturally. So in simple words, you have an OData service. This OData service could be exposed by one of your SAP systems using the gateway, or it could also be a service published by non-SAP servers. Then using the business application studio in BTP, you build a card on top of it. This card is then placed into a content package. A content package is just another development artifact that you create in Application Studio. The content package is then packaged into a zipped folder and downloaded onto your desktop. Next, we move to the build work zone. And here in the Content Explorer, you can upload the content package back and finally deploy the card into your business site. So that's how an integration card is going to be built. So let's not waste too much time in the theory. Doing it is going to be much more fun and we'll learn the theory afterwards. There is an important prerequisite that has to be met. Whenever you're setting up your development space in the Business Application Studio, make sure that under additional SAP extensions, you have the extension called as Development Tools for SAP Build Work Zone installed in your workspace. Now, this extension is necessary for efficiently creating the UI5 cards. So once we have made sure that this prerequisite has been met, let's proceed. Now, of course, I could simply give you the source code files, place them in a Git repository. You could clone it and your integration card would work. There is even a template wizard that you could use to create your integration card. But then we wouldn't really learn much. And if we were then to make some changes in the card on our own, we would find it difficult. So we are going to do it step by step the first time around so that our concepts about how the UI5 card works becomes clear. Now, most of us who have worked with SAP UI5 or Fiori, we would know there is a file called as the manifest.json. And the manifest.json file is the descriptor file for our application. It stores a lot of metadata about the application itself. And in the case of integration cards, the manifest.json is going to store all the information about the card. For example, the destination that it is going to retrieve data from, or the content of the card itself, any formatting of the data on the card, etc. All of this information is going to be stored in the manifest.json file. So this manifest is really the heart of your integration card. And when we say set up an integration card, what we actually mean is set up your manifest.json file. So I'm going to start by creating a folder called as invoices. And under this folder, I'll create a file called as the manifest.json. So now we are going to fill up this file. Now, since this is a JSON, let's start off with the curly braces. And all the content of the manifest.json descriptor file is contained in different namespaces. And these namespaces provide attributes. And by providing values to these attributes, you set up your descriptor file, right? So this is how, in general, the manifest.json file is built up. So let's add these namespaces here. Let's put in the first namespace called as sap.app. Now, a JSON file is basically a collection of name value pairs for different attributes. As an example, if you're using JSON to store information about employees, you could have an attribute whose name is employee name and then its value. You can, of course, have many attributes. This is, in short, how a JSON is basically structured, right? So in the case of our namespace attribute, the value is going to be a collection of many different name value pairs again. So it's going to be like an object, or if we were to speak in ABAP terms, it's going to be a structure. So therefore, for this, we will use the braces again. Now the first attribute that is going to be set within this particular namespace is called as the ID. This is the app ID, and this has to be unique. Hence, it's best to use a namespace. Let's set it up, and then the name of the application itself, which is invoices. Now in JSON, the name value pairs are separated by commas. So let's put in a comma and go ahead and specify the next attribute. This is going to be the type, and my app is an app of type card. So let's specify that here. And finally, we specify the application version attribute. So let's put in application version. This is the first version of this application, so 1.0.0. In a very similar fashion, let's go ahead and now add in the second namespace called as sap.card. Of course, the individual attributes have to be separated by a comma. The first attribute within this namespace is going to be what is called as the type. Now, there are many different types of UI5 cards, such as object, table, list, timeline, etc. In this particular tutorial, we are going to be looking at the UI5 card of type list. So now you see we have added two namespaces in our manifest.json, and within these two namespaces, we have set values to some of the attributes. Now, if you right click on your manifest.json file, here you will see there is an option called as UI integration card preview. Let's select this option, and you get a message here that says this is not a UI integration card. Now for this, let's create a folder under the root folder called as .card, and then under this particular folder, create a file called as card.project. And let's try to create the preview again. So we select the option UI integration card preview. And now you see there is a preview functionality, a preview function that gets executed here on the right side. This preview is going to get dynamically refreshed as we build out our card. All right. So it's always a good idea to keep it open here on the right side, and you can continuously preview your card. Now a card has three sections: the header, the content, and the footer. These are all attributes within the sap.card namespace. So let's go ahead and add in the header attribute. The value of this attribute is again going to be an object, so a structure. So let's put in the curly braces again. And the first attribute within this particular within header is going to be the title. Let's provide a title. Next, we'll specify the attribute called as subtitle. And finally, we are going to choose an icon that is going to be displayed in the header. Let's pay attention to the preview right now. So you can now see how the header is going to look like towards the end when the card is ready. As you can already imagine, it's a good idea to learn how JSON files are set up by using this name value approach, and how the SAP UI5 namespaces and their attributes are specified by using this JSON formatting technique. Now, for those of us who are not very comfortable working with JSON, the Business Application Studio provides us something very cool. So let's right click on the manifest.json file, and here you have the option called as the UI integration card edit. Let's select this option. This opens the same manifest.json file, but in a different format called as the property editor format. Let's drag this to the right here. Now, any changes we make to the manifest here will be converted into JSON format. So the property editor will do all the JSON formatting work for you. So you don't really have to concern yourself with handling the JSON syntax. So now we'll see the property editor in action. Let's continue filling our manifest.json file. I was done with the header, and next I'm going to need some content for my card. And the first section that I need to fill for this within the property editor is called as the data configuration card. And under this, we have something called as the JSON data. Now, this is the actual data that is going to be that is going to appear as content of the card. Now, when you create a card, you have two options. You can either use static content or you could use content that you have received from an OData service. Now, of course, static content doesn't make much sense, but it is quite useful if you want to showcase or try out some things and the OData service is not yet ready. In that case, it's a good idea to use static content. So for now, I'm going to use static data, and then later on, I'll convert it to use an OData service. In my JSON, I'll have the first attribute called as customer ID. The next attribute is going to be the customer name. Then we have the product ID followed by the product name, and finally the unit price. My card type is a list, and this is going to be the first item in the list. So let's enclose this in curly braces and put in a comma. And let's go ahead and create the second item in the list in a very similar fashion. And for completeness sake, I'll put in a third item as well. Now all three of these items are going to be part of the same array. So let's enclose this in square brackets. So this is going to be my JSON static content for now. So I'm going to copy this JSON content, and then within the manifest.json, under the section data configuration card, JSON data, I'll paste it over here. And then as soon as you do this, you can notice that the JSON static content that we pasted here was formatted and added to the correct attribute in the correct namespace in the manifest.json file. So this is the real big advantage of working with the property editor. You don't have to really concern ourselves a lot with the JSON formatting within the manifest.json file. So as I mentioned, these are hard-coded values for now, and later on we'll see how these can be retrieved from an OData service. So let's check the preview section. As you see, this is still empty. Now, why does this happen? My manifest.json descriptor has information on what the static content actually is. However, it does not know how to display the different items in the list. For each record within your data, there could be hundreds of attributes, but you may not want to display all of them in the list. So for this, we are going to be using the next section on the property editor. And this is going to be called as the content configuration. That's here down, content configuration. This is going to contain information on how each of the item in the card is going to appear. Now under title, I want to put out the customer ID and the customer name separated by a comma. The curly braces over here indicate that this is a binding to the data. Then I want the product ID and the product name to appear as the item description. I want to use a static icon for each of the items. I want to display the unit price as my info value. Finally, I'm going to use the item highlight function. If the unit price of an item in the list is less than 30, it should be indicated as green. And if the unit price is more than 30, it should be indicated in a different color as a warning. And this will help to draw the attention of the business user to that particular item since the unit price is high. So the way to do that, we specify a condition. The attribute to be evaluated is the unit price. If it is less than 30, it will be indicated as a success, so in green color. If not, then as a warning. And then we close off the specification. Let's have a look at our card preview now. And now you can see the individual items from the static JSON content that we had specified. They are now appearing as part of the list. And for each of the item, the title consists of the customer ID and the customer name as we had specified. And as description, you see the product ID and the product name. And then this was the icon that we have displayed for each of the items. The unit price appears as the info value. In addition, for each of the items, we are using the highlight function. We evaluate the value of the unit more than 30. It is displayed as a warning to draw the attention of the user. And if it is less than 30, then it is success, so green in color. So now that we have got our card set up for displaying the static JSON content, let's go ahead and see how we can change the static into dynamic. We will be making use of the Northwind OData service. And this particular OData service has an entity which is called as the invoices, and our card is going to be displaying data from this particular entity. So let's first create a destination that points to this particular website. So within my BTP sub account, I go to destinations and then click on create destination. I specify the name of the service. The type is HTTP. Let's put in a description here and then specify the URL. Please note, when you specify the URL here, you don't need the entire URL for the service. You just need the URL of the website where this particular service is being offered. The proxy type is internet, and this particular OData service has no authentication. So let's click on save. There are two properties that should also be specified, and they are the HTML5 dynamic destination. So we set its value to true. And then the next one is the web ID enabled, and that is set to true as well. So these are the two properties that we have to specify in the destination. Let's just quickly test whether our destination works. So we get a return code of 200. This is fine. So we have set up our destination here, and this destination is now going to be used in the UI5 card for retrieving data. Now let's go back to the Manifest.json in the application studio, and then let's scroll down to general configuration. And here under destinations, you have the button called add destination. Let's specify a key for our destination. Now this is the destination. This is the key that you're going to use to refer to the destination in your application. So let's give it a name. And then the label can be left blank. Under name, you have to specify the same name for the destination that you have given in the sub account while setting up your destination. So let's call it the same name as there, which is Northwind. And then under default URL, you need to specify not the base URL of the service, but the remaining part that you're going to use to access the service. So the base URL, the application is going to get the base URL from the destination itself. And here is the remaining part that points to the actual Northwind service. So now that the destination has been configured, the next step would be to use it within the application. So let's scroll down to data configuration card. And until now, we have been using the static JSON data. Instead of that, we will be using the data request URL to retrieve the data. So let's start specifying a URL here. The first thing would be to let the system know which is the location from which we want to pick up the data from, and that is going to be destinations.myDestination. So this is the key of my destination. And then we specify the remaining path of the service name. And at the end, we specify the name of the entity whose data we want to retrieve, which is invoices. The data request mode is going to remain same. Data request method is get as well. Use credentials is false. And then the data path for the JSON root results will be /t/results. So everything else remains the same. So let's have a look at our preview now. So now you see the data that is being retrieved is not our static JSON content. Instead, it's the one that is being returned from the OData service itself. So this is how you would shift from static data to dynamic data. So you define a destination and then use that destination within your app like we have just done. So as a summary of what we have done until now, in the Business Application Studio, we had set up our UI5 integration card. We created and filled out the manifest.json file by using the property editor. We then identified the OData service that we want to use to retrieve the data. And then we set up a destination in the sub account that points to this particular server. And finally, we had used the preview option to preview how our card would look like finally. So that's all for now. In part 2 of this video, I'll show you how to package this integration card into a content package and then deploy it to your business site so that this card then becomes available to all your users. As always, I would request you to try creating a card on your own in the Business Application Studio. If you found the content of this video useful, please do consider subscribing to the channel or dropping a like for this video. So until next time, take care and goodbye.